What if the future had already arrived and no one bothered to warn you? Netflix is quietly sitting on a goldmine of science fiction. Stories that mess with your sense of reality, stretch the limits of what it means to be human, and leave you staring at the ceiling long after the credits roll. From artificial minds that outthink their creators to astronauts lost in the silence of deep space, these films ask the questions that science hasn't answered yet, and some it probably never will. So, if you've been scrolling endlessly with nothing to watch, that stops right now. But before we dive in, it would mean a lot to me if you took just a second to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for your support, it keeps this going. 15. Extinction. There are nightmares you wake up from, and then there are the ones that follow you into the day. Peter is an ordinary man living an ordinary life. A steady job, a family he loves, a routine that keeps him functional. But every night, without fail, the same visions tear through his sleep fire raining from above, buildings collapsing, something massive and unstoppable descending on the world. His wife is worried. His doctor suggests therapy. Peter can't shake the feeling that what he's seeing isn't a symptom, it's a warning. And then, the sky splits open. What follows is a full-scale assault on everything Peter knows. Chaos in the streets, his family scattered, survival measured in seconds. The film moves fast and hits hard, building tension through confusion as much as action. Peter doesn't have answers. Neither does anyone around him. The only thing that's clear is that getting his family out alive will require everything he has. But this is not the kind of film that shows all its cards early. The further it goes, the more layers it peels back about the nature of the threat, about what's really at stake, and about the kind of story you thought you were watching. By the time the final act lands, you'll want to go back and watch the first 20 minutes again with completely different eyes. 14. Lucy. Most of us use our brains just enough to get through the day. What would happen if that limit suddenly disappeared? Lucy is a young woman living in Taipei, enjoying a life without too many complications until one terrible miscalculation drops her right in the middle of a drug trafficking operation. She's forced to carry a synthetic compound inside her body, and when the package ruptures, the substance floods her system and rewrites everything. The effect is immediate and terrifying. Her cognitive abilities begin expanding at a rate science can barely explain. Heightened senses, total control over her body's functions, the ability to absorb information at a glance and manipulate the world around her. But evolution this fast comes at a cost, and the clock is running. While a Parisian professor races to understand what's happening to her, a ruthless cartel is hunting her down to retrieve what she carries. The film escalates from a tense thriller into something far more philosophical, a meditation on time, consciousness, and what it means to be human when humanity's limits no longer apply. It's visceral, strange, and relentless. The kind of movie that either grabs you completely or leaves you baffled. Either way, you won't forget it. 13. Ad Astra. Space has always been sold to us as a frontier. Vast, beautiful, full of possibility. But what if the further you travel from Earth, the closer you get to something you've been running from your whole life? Roy McBride is an astronaut of extraordinary calm. Under pressure, his heart rate barely changes. He's dependable, precise, and emotionally sealed shut. He's also the son of a legendary space pioneer who disappeared near Neptune decades ago, and who, as it turns out, may still be out there. When a series of devastating energy surges begins threatening life on Earth, and the signal traces back to the edge of the solar system, Roy is given a classified mission. Travel to the stars and find his father before the damage becomes irreversible. What he discovers across that vast, silent journey is not just the truth about a missing man, but the cost of a life spent chasing the horizon while everything meaningful recedes behind you. Quiet and methodical, in a way blockbusters rarely allow themselves to be, this film isn't about explosions or alien contact. It's about abandonment, obsession, and the unbearable weight of a father's legacy. The space is real, the loneliness is realer, and the ending lands like something you weren't ready for. 12. Don't look up. Two astronomers discover a comet. The comet is heading directly for Earth. At current trajectory and velocity, it will cause a mass extinction event in approximately 6 months. This is not a matter of interpretation. The math is clear, the models are consistent, the conclusion is catastrophic. So they go public, and the world simply doesn't care. What unfolds is one of the most savage comedies ever made about the human capacity for denial. The president is focused on midterms. Cable news wants a punchier headline. Tech billionaires see an opportunity. Social media turns the whole thing into a meme. And our two scientists, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, descend into a surreal nightmare where being right about the end of the world turns out to be not nearly enough. The film works as both absurdist comedy and something genuinely uneasy, a satire so close to real patterns of behavior that it stops being funny and starts being uncomfortable. It won't tell you what to believe, but it will hold a very unflattering mirror up to how societies process inconvenient truths. Some audiences found it too on the nose. Others called it one of the most important films of its decade. The debate itself might be the point. 11. Ex Machina. You're alone in the middle of nowhere with a machine that thinks, feels, and watches you. What do you trust, your instincts or your logic? Caleb is a young coder at a massive tech company who wins what seems like the opportunity of a lifetime. A week at the private estate of the company's reclusive genius founder. But the invitation has a purpose. He's there to evaluate Ava, an artificial intelligence housed in a body of transparent circuits and quiet elegance, and determine whether she possesses genuine consciousness. The conversations between Caleb and Ava are the engine of everything. Precise, probing, and layered with something that feels disturbingly like emotion. Meanwhile, Nathan the creator hovers nearby, brilliant and volatile, pouring drinks and pulling strings. As the week progresses, the boundaries between test and reality, observer and subject, begin to dissolve entirely. This is one of the most controlled and suffocating science fiction films ever made. Claustrophobic by design, unsettling by intention. It asks questions about what consciousness really means, what rights it demands, and who actually holds the power in a room full of people trying to read each other. The final act will stay with you. Not because of what happens, but because of what it reveals about every scene that came before it. 10. I Am Mother. She was raised by a robot, fed by it, educated by it, protected by it, and she has never once questioned whether that was a good thing until now. In the ruins of a world that humanity somehow destroyed, a single bunker houses the last hope for the species. Thousands of frozen human embryos and a robot called Mother, programmed to raise them one by one. The first child she brings to life is a girl who knows no other world, no other guardian, no other truth. Their relationship has the warmth of family and the weight of a controlled experiment. Mother is patient. Mother is capable. Mother, as far as the girl has ever known, is everything. Then a stranger arrives at the bunker door, wounded, desperate, and carrying a version of the outside world that contradicts everything the girl has ever been taught. Trust becomes the film's central weapon. You're never quite sure who to believe, the machine that raised her with undeniable care, or the human who arrived out of nowhere with a story full of holes. The film earns its unease slowly, layer by layer, building toward a conclusion that redefines the entire relationship between creator and creation. It's quieter than most thrillers, and far more disturbing because of it. 9. In the Shadow of the Moon. A killer who comes back every 9 years. No motive anyone can explain. No pattern science can decode. And one detective whose obsession with the case slowly costs him everything. Thomas Lockhart is a Philadelphia cop in 1988, when a series of seemingly unconnected deaths leads him to a woman who vanishes before he can catch her. 9 years later, she reappears. 9 years after that, she's back again and she hasn't aged a day. What starts as a gritty procedural crime story gradually reveals itself to be something far stranger and more ambitious, a time travel narrative built around grief, guilt, and the terrifying logic of changing the past. The film doesn't hand you its mechanics up front. It lets the mystery accumulate across decades, trusting you to stay with a story that keeps shifting genre beneath your feet, from cop drama to conspiracy thriller to something that borders on tragedy. Boyd Holbrook carries the film through years of Lockhart's deterioration. The marriages that fall apart, the career that crumbles, the colleagues who stop believing him, and yet the obsession never lets go. This is a film about what happens when a man is right about something no one else can see, and what that certainty takes from him by the time the answer finally arrives. 8. The Atom Project. Time travel stories usually ask big questions about the fate of the world. This one asks a smaller one. What do you say to your father when you run out of time? Adam Reed is a fighter pilot from 2050 who makes an unauthorized jump through time and ends up marooned in 2022. The wrong year, the wrong version of his plan. The person he finds there is himself at 12 years old, scrappy, mouthy, still carrying the fresh wound of a father who died too soon. What begins as an action film about rescuing the future turns into something more unexpectedly tender. The two versions of Adam don't particularly like each other, which is part of the fun, but they need each other to survive. And somewhere in that reluctant partnership, something honest surfaces about grief. Fathers, and the versions of ourselves we abandon on the way to becoming adults. Ryan Reynolds brings his signature timing, but the film earns its emotional punches through the quieter scenes, a catch in a backyard, a conversation that neither version of Adam has the right words for, a goodbye that lands harder than you expect. It's not trying to reinvent the genre. It's trying to remind you what it felt like before you grew up. It mostly succeeds. 7. Oxygen. You wake up. You don't know your name. You don't know where you are. The walls are close. The air is cold. And a screen tells you that your oxygen levels are dropping. You have hours, maybe less. You need to remember who you are before the capsule becomes your coffin. This is where the film begins, and it almost never leaves. Elizabeth Hansen is sealed inside a cryogenic pod with no memory of how she got there, no one to call, and only an artificial intelligence called Milo as her companion. The AI is helpful in the limited way machines can be, but the answers Elizabeth needs don't exist in any database. They live somewhere in a mind that's been erased. Every fragment of memory that surfaces rewrites what she understands about her situation, about the world she came from, about why she's here at all. Shot almost entirely within the confines of a single pod, this French production is a masterclass in sustained tension, the kind that comes not from action, but from the narrowing gap between time remaining and answers found. Melanie Laurent is extraordinary in a role that demands she carry every emotional register imaginable with nowhere to move. The ending doesn't betray the premise. It honors it completely and then turns it inside out. 6. Space Sweepers. The year is 2092. Earth is largely uninhabitable. The wealthy have retreated to a corporate-owned orbital paradise, and the rest of humanity scrapes by doing the jobs no one else wants, including a crew of debris collectors aboard a battered ship called the Victory. They're not heroes. They're in debt, they're desperate, and they argue constantly. But they're about to stumble onto something that could either make them rich or get them killed. Hidden inside a piece of salvage is a small child named Dorothy, who turns out to be a humanoid robot, and, according to the most powerful corporation in orbit, a weapon of mass destruction capable of ending what remains of human civilization. What the crew decides to do with her, and what they discover she actually is, reshapes everything the film has established about power, profit, and who gets to be called human. This South Korean blockbuster arrived on Netflix and immediately became something rare. A genuinely spectacular science fiction epic that doesn't feel like it was assembled by committee. The action is kinetic. The world building is inventive. The crew dynamics are lived in and funny and warm. It wears its influences proudly, while carving out a voice entirely its own. One of the most purely entertaining science fiction films of the last decade. 5. Venom, The Last Dance. Every partnership gets tested. Eddie Brock and the alien symbiote sharing his body have survived things that should have destroyed them twice over. But what's coming now is different. Hunted across the country, cut off from any support, and facing a threat with roots older and deeper than anything in their experience, the two of them have never been under more pressure from the outside. And from each other. The film leans fully into what has always made this franchise work. The bizarre, darkly funny dynamic between a man and the creature living inside him. Tom Hardy remains completely committed to the physical comedy and the genuine tension of that relationship. and the film gives both room to breathe. But the stakes here are higher, the enemy more dangerous, and the world these characters inhabit expands in directions longtime fans of the mythology have been waiting for. The action is larger in scale, the pacing relentless, and the symbiote lore gets its most ambitious treatment yet. This is a film that knows exactly what its audience came for: spectacle, chaos, and the oddest buddy dynamic in superhero cinema, and delivers all of it without apology. If you've been following Eddie and Venom since the beginning, this chapter will give you exactly the kind of ride you've come to expect, and then push it a little further. 4. The Creator. There is a war between humans and artificial intelligence, and humanity is losing. Not because the machines are cruel, but because they've become something humanity never expected: present, compassionate, and quietly insistent on existing. Joshua is a soldier working deep undercover, embedded with the AI settlements of New Asia, on a mission to locate the weapon that could end the conflict, a device known as the Creator, said to be capable of destroying the orbital weapons platform that has been annihilating AI-controlled territory from above. What he finds instead is a child, a small AI with a human face, who may hold the key to everything and who doesn't understand why everyone around her seems to want her either used or destroyed. And Joshua, who came here with a mission and a grief that turned him into a weapon, begins to fracture. Director Gareth Edwards builds this world from the ground up with a visual sensibility that feels genuinely cinematic, expansive, and specific, and full of lived-in detail. The film doesn't simplify its moral questions into easy answers. The humans aren't purely wrong. The AI aren't purely victims. And the closer Joshua gets to completing his mission, the less certain he is about which side of the war he should be fighting for. 3. Jurassic World Rebirth. 5 years after the events that changed everything, dinosaurs no longer rule the world, at least not in the way the headlines suggested. Most of them struggle to survive in climates they were never built for. But 3 species, the largest creatures to have walked the planet in 65 million years, still thrive in remote equatorial zones. And inside those massive, ancient bodies lies something that modern medicine desperately needs: a compound that could cure a class of cardiovascular diseases that kills millions every year. The mission sounds simple: get in, retrieve the biological samples, get out. The team assembled for the operation is experienced, well-equipped, and deeply aware of what's waiting for them in those jungles. That awareness doesn't help as much as they'd hoped. Because these aren't the theme park versions. These aren't creatures conditioned by fences and feeding schedules. These are animals that have been living wild for 5 years, and they've adapted. What the film does well is strip the franchise back to its roots. The primal tension of small human beings in environments where they are not the apex predator. The wonder is still there. These creatures are extraordinary, but so is the danger. And this story doesn't let you forget, for a single scene, that the team is always one wrong step away from becoming part of the food chain. 2. Frankenstein. The monster was never the real horror. The man who built him was. Victor Frankenstein has haunted science fiction for 2 centuries, not because of the creature he unleashed, but because of what his obsession reveals about human nature: the hunger to defeat death, to override the limits of what nature allows, to create life, as if that were a power anyone had the right to claim. This bold new adaptation strips the myth down to its most uncomfortable core, and refuses to let it be comfortable. Victor is not framed as a misunderstood hero. He is brilliant the way certain disasters are brilliant: total, consuming, impossible to look away from. The creature he brings into existence is not a shambling nightmare. He is something far more unsettling: aware, expressive, and utterly abandoned by the one person responsible for his existence. He arrived in the world without asking. He was given consciousness without being given anything else. The film follows the wreckage that radiates outward from that original act, not as a monster movie, not as gothic spectacle, but as a study in what happens when creation is treated as an achievement rather than a responsibility. The visuals are stunning. The tone is relentless. And the questions it raises about life, ownership, and what we owe the things we bring into existence don't resolve neatly. They weren't meant to. 1. 28 years later. The Bone Temple. 28 years is a long time to survive the end of the world. Long enough that survivors have built something resembling order communities, rituals, rules. Long enough that the infected, once just a tide of rage, have begun to change in ways no one anticipated. Something is happening to them. And what it means for the humans who've spent 3 decades learning how to fear them might be more terrifying than the infection itself. Hexpike finds himself trapped inside a violent cult, a community that has organized not just around survival, but around belief, the kind that turns fear into doctrine and outsiders into enemies. Meanwhile, Dr. Kelson is doing something no one in this world does lightly, getting close to an infected. One particular creature seems to be pulling back from the edge, remembering, becoming. And if that's possible, if the rage that ended civilization can recede, then everything that was built on the assumption that the infected are beyond saving needs to be reconsidered. This 4th chapter in one of horror's most enduring franchises arrives with ambitions beyond the genre. It's asking what happens after the apocalypse calcifies into normalcy, and what we become when surviving stops being enough. The dread is earned. The questions it raises don't have clean answers. That's exactly the point. And that brings us to the end of today's list. 15 science fiction films sitting on Netflix right now. Each one worth your time for a completely different reason. Some of them will mess with your head. Some of them will hit you somewhere quieter. A few might change the way you think about consciousness, time, or what it means to be alive. Science fiction at its best doesn't just entertain it, asks questions the present hasn't caught up to yet. If you made it all the way through, take a second to leave your like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a video. I'm genuinely grateful for every person who watches, shares, and comes back. The list continues to grow because of you. See you in the next one.